Hey, Miami Bloco, Bateria Academy, class number 1. We're going to talk about rhythmic fundamentals today, how to sing your part over the pulse, and learn some basic syncopations and claves that we're going to use throughout the rest of the course and throughout all of our playing in Miami Bloco. The biggest thing we're going to go over first is part over pulse and using your voice as a way to play your instrument before you even approach it. It's that Nana Vasconcelos quote that you hear me say over and over again. The first instrument is the voice. The best instrument is the body. And that's the way that we approach things in Miami Bloco because that's how I learned it from Gabriel and Batuki Batu. I remember going to see that first rehearsal and seeing everybody step time together and sing the parts back and forth. And I saw how quickly it ingrained in people. Once you understand where the pulse is, you can put the part over the top and all of a sudden everything feels better and gets a little bit more tight. And that's what we're trying to do so that we have integrity to all these rhythms and everything glues together. So, in terms of feel, that's the first thing that we're going to go over a little bit today. There's 3 different feels that I like to think of that we're going to use a ton in Miami Bloco, right? If you have this pulse going, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. You can have a 2 feel. Dot, 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 right? And that's where you have 2 notes for every pulse. Dot, 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 dot. You can have a 3 feel. Dukala, 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 dukala. You can have a 4 feel. Dukalaka, 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 du. Right? And musically, I can represent each of these feels in a different feel and a different song. So, for example, the 2, if you think Billie Jean. There's your 2 feel. For the 3 feel, if you think our Baja Ventu, our 6/8 arrangement, right? That's kind of a 3 feel. For the 4, right, you can think our samba, right? Now, as we get deeper into the conversation about feel, one of the things that we have to address, especially being in a Brazilian drumming group, is talking about Brazilian feel and Brazilian swing. Because if I take that phrase, dukalaka, right, and I do it just straight without any kind of feel to it, dukalaka, 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 it's terrible. It doesn't swing at all, right? But if I put a little bounce into it, dukalaka, 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 du, it becomes that Brazilian swing that we know and love in Miami Bloco. And one way that I've heard this explained to me by Bernardo Aguiar, an incredible pandero player that I work with a bunch, is looking at Boomba Mill Boy, which is the one that we're covering this week in the Miami Bloco classes. If you're checking this out beforehand, it's going to be a fun night, and afterwards you'll have already heard this lesson. But Boomba Mill Boy is based on 2 rhythms together that become 1 new rhythm, right? And the easiest way to say it is 2 plus 3 equals 4, which is wrong, but it's so right in this context. 2 being this pattern. Dot, 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 dot. 3 being this pattern. Dot, 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 dot. So if I put a 2 here and a 3 here, and I stack them together, I get that boy feel. Which, if we break it down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, is 4 notes per beat, 4 notes per pulse, right? But it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It has a lilt, right? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So, thinking about samba and heru, which goes much faster, right? If you take that sound clip and you slow it down, it will become tukalaka, 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 tunkadaga, 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 tum. It becomes that boy feel all over again, right? So I think the easiest way to think of Brazilian swing and samba, and again, This is a super generic way of thinking about it because every style is going to have its own slightly different to the feel and all that sort of stuff. But if we're going like super big picture about this, one thing that you notice in almost all Brazilian music is that those kind of like 4 feels or 16th note feels are not straight. They're swung. In almost any Brazilian style, you can hear that kind of bounce and that lilt to it, right? So that's one thing to work on, is getting that feel, right? So that you have the 3, da 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 da. You have the 2, ba 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 ba, and you put them together. Da 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 da. So if I break it down, I go even smaller, right? Just one of them. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. You can see I'm starting together and ending together, right? Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Really slow. It's together, left, right, left, together, right? Together, left, right, left, together, right? Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 do kalaka do kalaka do kalaka do kalaka do. And there we have the famous do kalaka do kalaka do kalaka do that we're going to use so much and you guys know so well. All right, so now we're going to work on some different syncopation exercises. And what syncopation is a big scary word that really just means a part that doesn't line up exactly with the pulse every time. So instead of having something that's just boom, 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 anything that you have that's in between the beats, all that stuff is what we call syncopated rhythms. And it's a big, scary word in most of music education. I really dislike the way that they teach it here. They make it seem like it's the most difficult thing in the world, but it's not. It's walking and chewing gum. You guys can all do it. Can you step time and you can talk to me at the same time? That's syncopation, okay? And it's the same thing here, right? If we start singing those patterns, right? For example, our first syncopation exercise we're going to look at is one that's dealing with that 2 feel or 8th notes, right? So while you step time, I want you to sing da 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 da. Now we're going to play just the upbeats, okay? Just the ones in between until we land on beat 4. Try this phrase. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. You got it? Now we're going to try and put them together. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Again. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Very good, right? So that's a basic, super simple syncopation in kind of a 2 feel, all right? So now let's look at it in terms of a 3 feel, right? And for this, we're going to start using some syllables. For 3s, in this case, we're going to use this phrase. Do kala, 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 do, right? So that's going to be our main phrase that we're going to use when singing these rhythms, right? So the first part of this exercise is do kala, do kala, do kala, do kala, do. Again, do kala, do kala, do kala, do kala, do. One more time. Do kala, do kala, do kala, do kala, do. All right. Now, for the first syncopation of this one, what we're going to do is we're going to take out that very first note. Do kala, do kala, do kala, do kala, do will now become kala, do kala, do kala, do kala, do. Again. Kala, do kala, do kala, do kala, do. So you can feel me step time there. Kala, do kala, do kala, do kala, do. And then come in with that. And it's an interesting thing because if you think of that as a word, do kala, right? Do kala has 3 syllables. And you think of it and you would write it out as do kala, right? If you start on the second one and you switch this one over to the end, so then now it's this, I guess, right? it would be kaladu, kaladu, which sounds like a whole nother word. Kaladu, 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 versus do kaladu, 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 right? It's the same kind of feel, but by starting the phrase in the middle of it, you create another word. And I think that's such a big key to a lot of Brazilian melody and rhythm, all that sort of stuff, is not always starting exactly on the downbeat with those types of words and thinking about them instead of do kaladu, it's more kaladu, 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 which kind of gives it a little bit more rolling feel, right? So let's try that again, starting from with the downbeat and then taking it out. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Take it out. Kaladu, 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 kaladu. Back in. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Now take it out. Kaladu, 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 kaladu. Keep the feet going, okay? The next part of this exercise. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Do kala, kaladu, kadu. Let's try it again. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Do kala, kaladu, kadu. One more time. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Do kala, kaladu, kadu. All right, now let's try and put the whole thing together from the top. Do kala, do kala, do kala, do kala, do. Kaladu, 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 kaladu. Next section. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Do kala, kaladu, kadu. From the top again. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Take out the first. Kaladu, 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 kaladu. Second section. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Do kala, kaladu, kadu. One last time. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Kaladu, 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 kaladu. Do kaladu, 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 kaladu. Do kala, kaladu, kadu. All right, and now we're going to try a similar idea with a 4 feel, right? So now instead of do kala, do kala, do kala, our bass is going to be do kalaka, 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 do. Everybody's favorite word. Do kalaka, do kalaka, do kalaka, do. And the same way that we thought about the 3 as being maybe 2 words within that one phrase, you can either have do kalaka, do kalaka, do kalaka, do, or you can have kalaka, do kalaka, do kalaka, do, where you start on the second partial, right? Again, kalaka, do kalaka, do kalaka, do. Again, kalaka, do kalaka, do kalaka, do, versus do kalaka, do kalaka, do kalaka, do. Do kalaka, do kalaka, do kalaka, do, right? So, let's try this one. This time, when we do this exercise, we're going to start without the 16th note. So keep the feet going. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kalakadu. Do kalakadu. Kalakadu. Do kalakadu. Again. Kalakadu. Do kalakadu. Kalakadu. Do kalakadu. Got it? Okay, now we're going to go to the second part of that phrase. We're going to speed it up a little bit and get them closer together. Kalakadu, do kalakadu. 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 Very good. The whole thing from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kalakadu. Do kalakadu. Kalakadu, do kalakadu. Kalakadu, do kalakadu. Again, kalakadu, do kalakadu. Kalakadu, do kalakadu. Kalakadu, do kalakadu. Cool? And that's a great way to start practicing that idea of syncopation and being able to keep that pulse going while you change the part over the top and doesn't affect what's going on in your feet, right? It's super important too, when you play that first note, kalakadu, that you really step that beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, kalakadu. And then land on 2. 2, 3, 4, kalakadu. Right? You see how that lands? 1, 2, 3, 4, kalakadu. Right? Keep that in mind for all of these different exercises. Okay, next, we're going to go over some different clave patterns, right? And clave is a term you probably know, especially here in Miami for Afro-Cuban music. It's an instrument, right? It's 2 pieces of wood that you hit together. What clave literally means is key, right? And when we think of music, we think of harmony, we think of melody, we think of things having a key. We're in the key of A major, we're in the key of D minor, whatever the key may be. That means that everything that you play note-wise and harmony-wise has to fit within that key somehow, right? Rhythmically, clave is the same concept. When you have a clave, when you have a rhythmic clave, that is kind of like the base feel that everything else works around. When we're talking in terms of Afro-Cuban music, it tends to be very strict, right? You have this 2-3 clave, you play this tumba pattern, you play this cascada pattern, it goes with it exactly. In Brazil, it's a little looser, but there is still a basic idea of a feel that everybody plays around. It is not as rigid as a clave, and if you say that to some Brazilians that there's a clave in Brazilian music, they will shut you down because it's kind of true. There isn't that law, right? But there is a basic feel that you play around with and that you bounce around with. So we're going to work on some of those today, right? And for this, I'm going to go ahead and play along down here on my pandeiro so that you get a basic feel to sing over the top with, right? I'm thinking in terms of 2, really. 1, 2, 1, 2. But you could think of it as 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The important part is the pulse, that you're stepping time with this tone. That's where your feet go. Got it? All right. The first clave we're going to work on, a phrase called Palma da mão, right? Which is just hand clap, palm of your hands. And you hear that all the time in the pagode. Someone go, Palma da mão, Palma da mão. And what everybody plays is da, 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 da. All right? So just clapping that. Ba, 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 ba. Comes out like that. And one important thing to note about this one in particular is when you're stepping time with your feet, and I'm going to exaggerate here so you can really see what I'm doing. There's a temptation to go ba, ba, da, ba, ba, da, ba, ba, da, and line up your feet with what your mouth is doing. But you have to realize that second note in this phrase, ba, 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 comes right before your other foot, your left foot, right foot, whatever you're starting with. Ba, 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 ba. And we can kind of represent that vocally by singing this phrase. Pa, 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 And that is where that foot goes. Pa, 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 pa. Right? So, if you take the out, it becomes pa, 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 pa. But it's super important to keep that feel of beat 2 in there. Pa, 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 pa. And not turn to pa, 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 pa. Keep that pulse there. Pa, 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 pa. Right? Because while you're playing that on tamborim, Sordo's going doom, 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 doom. So that has to be locked right in with them. One more time. Palma da mão. Pa, 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 pa. Right? Cool. The second variation of that Palma da mão phrase that you'll hear a lot, and if you've downloaded the metronome that I'm sure I told you about at the Bateria Academy on Sunday, there's a feel there called samba de roda, and you can hear this clap in that samba de roda exactly. It's this phrase. 1, 2, here we go. Da 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 da, 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 da. Right? So that phrase is kind of an extension of the other one. In the second half of the phrase, you hear ba, da, da, which is the same thing we just did, right? The first half of the phrase, that first note just gets shifted over by 1/16th note is a technical term for it. But you can think of it as just coming right after the downbeat. Da, da, da. Again. Da, da, da. Da, da, da. Da, da, da. Right? And then if you put the two measures together, it's da, 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 da. Ba, 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 ba. With the pandero, becomes this. Ba, 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 ba. Cool? Palma dama 1. Ba, 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 ba. Palma dama 2. Ba, 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 ba. Next, let's talk about Partido alto. Partido alto is a style within samba, like a subgenre, and it's also a rhythm that you'll hear played on a bunch of different instruments, right? In our case, in Miami Block, we hear it on the caixa a ton. Tugu gaku 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 gaku. You notice this one has kind of two tones, right? Dugu gaku 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 gaku. Right? So if I play the pandero under there, you can hear that fits into it. Dugu gaku 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 gaku. Cool? That's Partido alto number 1. Dugu gaku 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 gaku. So that Partido alto pattern gets played on the caixa like that. Another place that you hear it a ton is on the pandero. Now, not in the context of Miami Bloco or a full samba school, but in samba de roda, if you go to a samba de roda, you will hear the pandero player playing. Which is kind of a variation on the last feel we just did. Singing it as 2, 3, 4. Sugu gatu 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 gu gatu gu gatu 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 gu gatu gu taku gatu gatu gu gatu gu gatu 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 taku taku gu gatu gu gatu taku taku gu gatu gu gatu 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 gu gatu gu gatu 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 gu gatu gu taku gatu gatu gu gata. So Partido alto 1. Dugu gatu 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 gatu. Partido alto 2. Dugu gatu 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 gu dugu gatu 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 gu dugu gatu 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 gu. And one thing to note is that all these numbers I'm throwing out, Partido alto 1, Partido alto 2, is all made up. It's all made up. Nobody thinks of them that way. They think of kind of basic ones, more advanced ones. They think of different feels, but there's no categorization to it. We're just putting numbers to it so that you can understand the difference between them in this context. But the further you go into this music, the more you realize that there is not a hierarchy of patterns or anything like that. There's just different feels that get played in different contexts by different musicians, right? For our purposes, it's going to be Partido alto 1. Tugu tatu gatu 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 gatu, and Partido alto 2. Tugu gatu 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 gu gatu 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 gu. All right, another phrase that we're going to work on today: Telecoteco. Telecoteco is the name of a pattern that's usually played on the tamborim, right? And the full phrase has tons of variations, right? But we're going to start off with a basic one that's a little more stripped down, and then we're going to go into a slightly more advanced one, okay? That has a few more notes in it. Advanced is the wrong word. It's just busier. All right, so Telecoteco number 1. 1, 2, 3, ah. Da, 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 ba, 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 right? So that's a very syncopated rhythm, right? There's tons of offbeats and all that sort of stuff, but it ain't nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ba 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 ba. Now, Telecoteco is a very interesting rhythm because Telecoteco is really in 4. We talked about in samba, and you heard Guilherme and Gustavo talk about this as samba in 2 versus samba being 4. Telecoteco pattern is definitely in 4, right? Ba 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 ba. And you can hear it really resolve and land on beat 4. Ba 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 ba. Right? That's where it really lands on there. But it starts in the offbeat. Ba 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 ba. Right? The truth of the matter is that when this is played in context, it never starts on the offbeat. Hardly ever. It almost always starts on the downbeat with kind of an introductory phrase that gets you to that beat 4 so that you can jump off again and go into the Telecoteco phrase. So, if we're starting from the top, this one will be 1, 2, 3, 4. Da 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 da. And that intro phrase, da 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 da, takes you to beat 4. Da 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 da. And from there, you can jump off and go into the syncopation. Da 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 da. But that intro phrase just happens on the first time through to enter into the groove. And once you're in the groove, you sit in the groove, right? So let's try that together. I'll play the Partido part underneath. And the intro phrase, the Telecoteco. Ba da 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 da. Again, one more time. 3, 4. Ba 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 ba. Cool? Telecoteco number 1. Okay? And the second Telecoteco phrase is where it gets a little bit hairy, right? Because from here, there's any number of variations you can do on this. We're just adding in a few extra notes to like thicken out the feel, and you could put them in a bunch of different spots. So we're just going to pick one arbitrarily and go with it as our second one, but just know that there's a bunch of different ways to do this one, okay? So we're going to still use that same intro phrase, da, 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 right? Starting off with that. But we're going to add a little tag to it and go into a more fully developed Telecoteco rhythm, right? Here it goes. 1, 2, 3, ah. Da 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 da. Right? So if we just look at just the cell of the Telecoteco, it's this. Da 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 da. And with the intro phrase becomes da 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 da. Right? Putting that with the Partido. Da 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 Cool. From there, you can add any other variations on that you want, right? It can be dot 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 dot, or it can be dot 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 dot, or it can be dot 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 dot. There's a bunch of different variations on it. For today, we're gonna stick with this one. Dot 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 dot. Cool. All right, and then the last clave that we're going to work on today is a 6/8 clave, right? Which fits into that 3 feel that we talked about earlier. From our 6/8 Baja Vento arrangement, when we start that one of the first things that you hear is a bell pattern in the side of the hipiki. Right? So the underlying grid, the 3 feel, is a little different. And the clave fits here. Again, very similar to the Telecoteco phrase, it lands on beat 4. Right? If I put that with a pandeiro, it fits like that. Cool. There's a second bell pattern that gets used sometimes as well too, which is slightly different. And it's a little different because it kind of leans into that third beat a little bit more, right? The first one is ba 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 ba. The second one is ba 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 ba. But they all have that underlying dukala 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 do feel to it. So all the stuff that we covered today, everything you should be able to do singing while stepping, right? Ba 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 da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba. You should be able to do it playing here on your chest. And you should be able to play it on your instrument, whatever it is. Surdo, caixa, repiki, tamborim. You can do all these same phrases just to kind of understand what they are. You may not play them in that context when you're in the musical group, but to get a sense of what everybody's really circling around, it's important for everybody to understand what these different claves are and be able to feel them in the right spot, right? So on your instrument, on your body, and in your voice, it's all there and it's all over the pulse. Keep that going the entire time.